Hi, Dr. David. So good to be with you tonight.
Same here, Tammy. Thanks so much.
So I'm going to turn the screen over to you. I'll let you introduce yourself and then share the topic that you're sharing tonight.
Okay, great. Thanks. Good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. David Fawcett. This is our weekly webinar on addiction Q&A. The format is typically I do a little brief introduction of a topic and then throw it open. You can share or ask questions about that or about anything else you'd like about addiction. So it's really pretty much of an open format. I work, of course, at Seeking Integrity. I specialize in some of the paired substance abuse and sexual behavior. And this is my book, cheap plug, Less Men and Men. And I see the residence is on tonight, and I want to give a shout out to everyone there because I was there last week and not in the greatest of health, and especially shout out to Dr. T, who really helped me out. So tonight, actually last week, in my grovelly voice, I started talking because the New Year's Day, we started talking about beginner's mind as opposed to setting New Year's resolutions, anything like that. And I just want to continue another kind of related idea about that tonight, and that's the idea of setting intentions. I think it's something that is really important and a nice little way of incorporating an intention into our day, into our activities, into whatever we may be doing. And the distinction to me, an intention is not a goal. You know, a goal is to lose 10 pounds or to get that promotion, or it's really focusing on something we don't have. An intention really is building on who we are in the moment, focusing on what we want, and really kind of aligning just an attitude about the day or the project that we're working on. It's an aim, it's a purpose to kind of align ourselves. And I find personally it's really helpful to kind of ground myself, to get focused on the day and just kind of set an atmosphere before I walk out the door in the morning to really see, to kind of get myself in shape. So what intention is really clearly stating how I feel today. Instead of wishing that I felt better, it's really putting the power of change in my own hand. So for example, it could be today I practice being non-judgmental of myself or others. Today I want to open my heart to whatever feelings I may have. Today I want to be vulnerable. I really want to set the intention of being vulnerable to whatever comes along and being open to feelings. Today I want to let go of fear. Today I want to live in balance. So you get the idea. It's the intention to really sort of work with where we're at in a positive way that kind of frames the whole day. And I found that no matter what comes along, if I have that intention set to live with peace in my heart, to live with being vulnerable, or to live being as generous a person as I can, it kind of sets a whole nice attitude. And there's one really interesting bit of science about this. There was a Japanese scientist who, his name was Masaru Emoto. He actually looked at the intention, the power of intention on water crystals. And in frozen water crystals, he was able to measure the shape and the impact of intention. And I just want to read this to you because in frozen water, he had sort of people who are like we have people who really are good prayers, you know, world-class people who pray. These are really world-class people who can set intention and really focus their energy and their power. When these water crystals had certain power intentions focused on them, concentrated on them, they actually changed. And so power that water that had been exposed to loving words showed, when it formed snowflake patterns, brilliant, complex, colorful kind of patterns. In contrast, polluted water resulted from negative thoughts and really asymmetrical patterns of the freezing. So it was just kind of an interesting idea. I don't know that that's been replicated, that study has gotten a lot of notoriety, but I do like the idea. And I do believe that certainly, I'm not sure if I can change water crystals with my intention, but I know I certainly can change my attitude about the day and how I go through the day and really my impact on other people. If I'm in a good place, I think that shows and it spreads, it's viral. So that's kind of my 2 cents on intentions. There's a few more just to give you an example. Today I intend to stay steady, calm, and balanced. today I intend to act with courage. You get the idea. To embrace change, to give and receive love, to allow myself to be vulnerable, to connect with others, and so on. So I just think it's a nice way to start the day and to carry on through the day. You know, in 12-step program, we have this expression: if our day's going really badly, we can start it over. It can be 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but I can restart my day and kind of change my attitude. And I've done that as well with intentions. If I'm having a lousy day, I kind of reboot, restart it, and try to set a healthier intention that really reframes the day. So that's my.
I love that. I think it's really interesting too that you, you're setting the intention. I was thinking before you talked about coming back to it too. Like, do you have to remind yourself of it, occasionally throughout the day?
I do. I try to. In fact, maybe I'm compulsive, but I sometimes write them down, because I also find that writing, this is just fact, when we write something with our hands, it actually has a great power in terms of helping the mind set it in. That's why a lot of times, if I'm working with people, I ask them not to do some written assignment, not to type it on their computer, but to rather write it in longhand, which seems really, really old school and boring and slow. But neurologically, it actually helps imprint that message. And interestingly, for that, I'm really often in the weeds here. When we write something, the neurological process are such that we sometimes surprise ourselves with what comes out on the paper. So our brain filters aren't as adept as intercepting things when we're writing by hand. And so journaling by hand is actually quite a powerful tool.
I've heard of people making people write with their non-dominant hand too, because it even further slows down the process. So
exactly, same idea.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I do Post-it notes. I'll have Post-it notes stuck in different places of things, I need to remember, or people I want to, think good thoughts of, and things like that too. But it was interesting because I was like, oh, I do that. I'm the queen of Post-it notes because I'll have them stuck in lots of places. I was wondering too, like, do you pick is it just for today I'm going to live in balance, or do you go this week I'm going to be intentional and live in, and repeat the same intention for multiple days? Or
totally, I've done that on occasion. I'll if I'm working on something on myself that I want to focus on something for several weeks, for example, and really set the intention to really examine some concern I have and do it with an open heart, or doing with being open to receiving whatever the feedback is I get from the world, just kind of throwing it open. So yeah, absolutely, it can go on. And I'm sure people, like what you just said, Post-it notes, this is a really close cousin of affirmations, right? Mm-hmm. And I use Post-it notes for affirmations all the time, mm-hmm. just because, like, when we write them, when we see them, it's a different neurological process. So we're kind of giving ourselves the benefit of different forms of input, whether it's hearing our voice speak or reading it or hearing it. So it all helps. It all reinforces it.
The water crystals is fascinating. And then I've shared on webinars before that, like, I kill plants, like they're not safe in my house. And I almost wonder if like, as I'm bringing them in and they're alive and I'm going, like, I hope I don't kill you. Like, if I'm serious. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe if I start talking lovingly to them, I'm actually going to have to try that.
Yeah.
I'm going to try it. I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted on that.
You're bringing your earth goddess powers into this plant. Absolutely.
The only plants that are really safe in my house are the silk ones right now. So, and I love plants, so it's really one of those. It's challenging, but I think I'm hearing that with the water crystals. I was like, well, if you can transform a water crystal, certainly you should be able to say loving things to plants and have them.
And the flip side of this works as well, in a bad way. So if we are constantly kind of telling ourselves negative things, I think that actually kind of pushes us toward that negative outcome. And I'm going to get sick, or that person behind me sneezed, or I've even had clients over the years who, men who would talk about, my grandfather died in his 50s and my father died in his 50s and I'm going to die in my 50s. And boy, just take that out of your head, because that's really setting an intention that you don't want to be carrying around.
Yeah, well, and for me, too much negativity, like even the news, like when there's a lot of stuff, I can't be around it because I feel it affects me. And
Right.
so I have to be intentional about the things that I'm surrounding myself with,
Absolutely.
whether it's music or the reading, uplifting readings and things like that. I am very intentional about that because I have found that the more of that negative stuff I'm around, it's hard to hold a positive boundary for myself if all of that is incoming. So,
Right. Great.
um, so we have a question. This is off topic. We welcome off topic. You are,
Absolutely.
let me clarify. You are welcome to ask, anything, whether it's about intentions or whatever. So please, the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, please type your questions in here. This person says, I cheated on my wife with men. I've been sober for 1.5 years and we're trying to reintegrate sexually. I have lots of fear. Can you shed some light? Can you shed some light on the reintegration, please? That's a great question.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm sorry you had that experience. There's when we're in the process of recovery, we really have to kind of be gentle with ourselves and with our partners and really explore in a very careful way the nature of some of our attractions. I don't know when you say sober, if that means sexually abstinent or drug abstinence. Sometimes we see people who are in heterosexual relationships who use drugs and have sex with men. And that sometimes goes together in terms of disinhibiting and that sort of thing. I would suggest that you both have some professional assistance here. And I think it's important. First of all, I want to say just your attitude about wanting to heal this is really important. And that's really essential. There are maybe some underlying issues here that you really probably want to explore with a therapist or with some kind of professional help, just to see where those concerns lie, what that means, if they're related to your addictive acting out, or if the addiction is something that you're doing to keep those at bay, and they periodically emerge.
He did add sexually sober, no drugs. So so just to clarify.
Okay. So I think it's important to then work with your therapist and look at your boundary plans and see what's going on there and really what led to this. Really, it's important not to drop into shame, not to even feel guilt, although that's probably going to be natural. But these are important data points. I think you can look at this episode and go back and sort of see what happened, what preceded it. Were there certain emotions? Were there feelings? Were there communication issues? What allowed this to emerge? And is this a longstanding pattern? Was this a single thing? These are the questions I would ask as a therapist. Is this the first time this has ever happened? Is this something that's happened before? How is this related to your acting out in general? Obviously, you want to be able to have a relationship with integrity, and this would fall outside of that clearly. But I think the fact that it's with a man as opposed to another woman adds another layer here that really needs to be explored. And there's all kinds of ideas around that, but I think that's really best pursued with a professional therapist who can help you explore these in a really safe way. The important thing is that I hear your desire to fix this, to heal this, and that's really, really important. But the specificity of the person you acted out with, I mean, that's very meaningful, and it's really worth exploring. And without knowing more about your history and some of the other factors, it's really hard to really say much more than that, unfortunately.
So Dr. David and Dr. Rob are both trained as sexologists as well as sex addiction therapists. So, my thought was also working with somebody who's got that training. I did add in the chat, added a couple of resources that may be helpful, maybe not. But Bill and Ginger Burkaw wrote a it was a book and a workbook, I think, as I recall, about sexual reintegration. And there were some helpful exercises in that might be useful for you. And then another book that I've shared with others, Hot Monogamy, and I love the title, by Dr. Pat Love, but again, it's a workbook. I remember that one, because there was I answer these questions, you answer these questions, and then we talk about it. But both of those will give you a platform to kind of look at where things are at, communicate about some things that can be difficult to communicate with. But I 100% agree with Dr. David. Having a trained therapist that can help guide the process would be optimal. So
I want to clarify too, because sometimes there's some confusion that when there's a sexual attraction, for example, to same-sex orientation, that's not really addiction, right? And I think sometimes we get people coming in with a disturbing attraction. They have that, and it's uncomfortable for them, and they think that if they get into sexual sobriety, that's going to solve that problem. And it's really, we don't change sexual orientation. That's not something that goes with the addiction per se or recovery. So again, that's why I'm saying it's really important to kind of explore these issues and see what's going on there. And then, and not only to be fair to yourself, but to your wife, and to see what that means and where you go from here.
And there are qualified people to help. So if you aren't currently working with something, I will type my email address in here, but you can always reach out to me, and I will do my best. If you do that, tell me where you're located as well, so I can help you hopefully find somebody that can support your recovery work with that. So
Tammy is an amazing resource. She knows everybody.
I know lots of people. So yeah, and I really do. It isn't 100%. Every now and then I get somebody going, that was a bad referral, and sometimes it's just not the right fit. So it might be that both of you are great. It just is the wrong fit. And I'm sorry about that. But sometimes, therapists are human. So sometimes they say or do something that is hurtful. And obviously we never want to do that. So, I always try to explore, what happened, and, get a better framework. Every now and then I find out, somebody I refer to is not probably somebody I want to continue to refer to, but I really do try. So other questions or comments? You would love some more.
We are open.
Well, I'm going to ask you, because I was in the rooms with Dr. David one time, and the question came up about nicotine, and I've been dying to get this recorded on a webinar. So I would like you to share what happens, because with Seeking Integrity Los Angeles, we are a non-smoking, non-vaping facility, and occasionally people come in, looking for the ability to continue that. And I was in the rooms, Dr. David and I were subbing for Dr. Rob one night, and he talked about nicotine, and I was like, everybody needs to hear that. So here's my opportunity to capture that with you, Dr. David.
Okay. So yeah, we feel really strongly about nicotine. First of all, if nicotine and alcohol, by the way, if they were introduced today, I think they would never ever be approved. They're both highly, highly dangerous drugs. But nicotine is particularly, I think, dangerous because, first of all, it's so common, it's socially acceptable for the most part, although that's changing somewhat. But nicotine works in a way that really teaches the brain how to become addicted. And unfortunately, it's often the first drug people use, but it goes right to this reward circuitry that is the core of the addictive process in our brains. And nicotine, of course, is an amphetamine. It's a stimulant, much like cocaine, much like methamphetamine. And nicotine actually gives us more of a dopamine kick, those feel-good transmitters of dopamine. Nicotine releases more of that than an orgasm. And so you can start to see the power of the appeal because it feels good and we want to repeat it, just like we do an orgasm. But the danger with that is that it really teaches the brain how to become addicted. It really trains, it's the first drug really that trains that part of the brain how to drop into this desire state, this anticipatory state of wanting and then wanting more. And it's really a tough drug to kind of break that cycle of. As I'm an ex-smoker, I can testify to that. It's a tough one. But I believe that a lot of treatment centers, if we have someone who are people who are trying to get clean from drugs, and we allow them to smoke, it's really doing them a disservice, because it's like keeping their motor idling all the time. They're not it's not never really shutting off. It's never really turning off. There's always this low level of stimulation of desire and want that's going on with nicotine. And so we feel it's important to really help people get off nicotine for recovery. Just, I think it's a much cleaner, safer, and frankly, more comfortable recovery. Now, if somebody wants to come to us and they're a smoker, we'll help them get off. But we are a non-smoking program, and nicotine, I think, is really just because of the level of commonality. It seems like everybody smokes. It really is underestimated in terms of the danger it can do. But it really, if we look at methamphetamine, for example, which is a really powerful drug, of course, and causes this sort of torrent of release of dopamine on this massive scale, nicotine is doing the same thing, just on a smaller dose. And so I think if we have people trying to get off cocaine or methamphetamine or any other drug, and they're still smoking, they're kind of constantly triggering themselves at a low grade way. And so it's a much cleaner, safer way to just get off it. And people are much healthier.
Yeah, well, and I have my personal thoughts on it too, but to me, it's like I want to be, in the program we talk about happy, joyous, and free, and I can't be happy, joyous, and free if I'm constantly using something, food, cigarettes, whatever it is I'm using to alter my mood a bit. And my sense is, because I've seen people as they're smoking, and it's a mood altering experience for them, so they're interrupting that, like you said, it's kind of always at idle. So they're continuing to do this, which doesn't let them really get to I think the good stuff of being in recovery. So
right.
So he does it in the very doctor way, and I go the very low key way.
Of course, how far does that go? There's caffeine, and there's sugar, and there's other things as well. And I think it's very easy for an addict to transfer those compulsions to other areas. And are those mood changing compounds? Yes, they are. And I think caffeine gives you a jolt, and a lot of people feel caffeine. A lot of people are addicted to caffeine. If you ever tried to give it up, you may get headaches or get sleepy. But I think, to me, and I drink coffee. I try to limit sugar, but I do sugar as well. But it's not quite the same mechanism in the brain, the way nicotine is, in terms of the power of that release. So, but I think it is a cautionary tale to make sure that people don't just transfer their addictions to other things, because that's easy to do as well. Especially, I think, with what we call the process addiction, the behavioral addictions like sex addiction. Some others would be gambling or exercise, even food. So I think it's really important to kind of be cautious about all of that, because addicts, and I'm one, I think we're very compulsive by our nature, and it's really sometimes much easier to dive into some other compulsive behavior than to deal with feelings. But I think that's really something to be alert to and aware of.
Yeah, amen to that. So I decided, and I don't drink soda anymore, because I decided that I was drinking diet soda, but it was the chemical stuff, and I was like, it's just not good for me, so I'm going to quit. So I started drinking coffee, and then I decided I was drinking more coffee than I was drinking that. So I still drink coffee, but I limited how many do I drink, and there's a great question here. Do you find a similar problem with food addictions too, like sugar? It is so addictive yet socially acceptable, and keeps the addictive cycle going. And that was my last hurrah. This last year, I was intentional about, I didn't 100% cut it out, because I just couldn't quite go that way. But, I really was intentional. I set an intention about, I could only have one dessert a day, seriously. And, like it was really hard, and it got easier, and I feel better, but sugar is very tricky, and it's in so many things. But yeah, food you know, food is everywhere, and, you know, and setting a good intention with that. But yeah, your thoughts, Dr. David?
Yeah, I mean, totally. Food, like sex, is something that we have to learn how to manage in our lives, right? We need both, and for the longest time, um, these these were really controversial, and they're not. You know, sex addiction, for a long time, the real traditionalists would say if it's not a drug, it's not an addiction. And what we know, of course, now that we can do brain scans and really see the impact of certain behaviors, there's all kinds of ways an addict can trigger that feel-good release. And it can be through drugs or alcohol, but it also through sex or porn or even food. And food is a sugar, it's a mood-altering compound. And so I think absolutely we have to be cautious about it. There was a lot of denial about that as well. Just say it can't be an addiction. Well, yeah, it is. It can be addiction. So I think we have to really be cautious about it and really learn, just like sex, how to integrate it in healthy ways. Like you were saying, Tam, you just kind of limit it. Some people cut it out totally. So there's all kinds of ways to manage it. But I think to really recognize that it's starting to become a problem is the key. And then to really go from there. But I just want to emphasize that it's so easy for us addicts to transfer that need. You know, I went from alcohol and drugs. I'd given up smoking before, thinking that was my denial system. I thought smoking is my problem, not the fact that I was drinking, you know, a fifth a day. Nothing got better. So my first day in program, like we could smoke in those church basements back then. I picked up cigarettes. You better believe it. But on my first day, I quit. But then I started to watch sugar, and I started exercise, and I started to have a little issue with credit cards, and just all those things that that we have to work through. So yeah, we are addicted people if we're in this room, probably, and we need to really be careful.
Well, I share with people often that this is just the symptom. You know, there's the underlying issues. And for me, it's the hole inside that I'm always looking to fill. And if it's not drinking and drugs, you know, or smoking or sex, or it's food, because food was a big deal for me. So always looking to numb out, escape. And I know for sure I can get as numbed out on food as I did when I was drinking. So I really had to work on, I had to deal with an eating disorder. So it was, and that was harder because you have to learn to have a relationship with food. You don't have to have a relationship with alcohol. You just quit, so, which sounds trite, but it isn't. But, it's all hard, but it's harder with sex and food and spending and all of those things that you have to do in order to be part of society and live. So yes, and yes, socially acceptable. Like you were talking, David, that alcohol and smoking wouldn't even be allowed. But I'm going, but cannabis, is getting more and more legalized, and it's not the pot that, and I don't want to be controversial here, but I do think about, the pot that I smoked was baby pot compared to the strength of the pot that's out there now. So it is really challenging. And just because it's socially acceptable doesn't mean that there aren't people there's probably lots of people that can do all that stuff and not have an issue. But for someone like me, just because it turned legal does not mean it's going to be okay for me. It would be highly problematic. So,
and I'll say too that just the social acceptability of marijuana is being approved everywhere, and I don't want to get into that either. That's fine for some people. My concern is for adolescents, because marijuana does have a really negative impact on the developing brain. And the fact that it seems to be socially acceptable is taken right in by adolescents who think, well, this is okay. And it's not safe for younger people. So
I was not motivated on the baby pot that I was like, that made me, I would never get anything done, but that's just me. So, okay. So here's a question. How important is it to admit past infidelities to your partner to effectively recover from sex addiction? This seems like the most terrifying part of recovery to me and makes me fearful of going down the road to recovery if this is a non-negotiable in the process.
Great question, and very normal concern and fear as well. What we know is that it's really important to have an effective disclosure if you want to rebuild that trust on the part of your partner. Now, there are some really special guidelines for disclosure. And I think most partners, if they've been bumping along the road of sex addiction for a while, have experienced what we call rolling disclosures, right? Somebody may get caught or revealed somehow, and so they, yeah, well, I did this and this and this, not telling about that and that and that, that they're kind of holding off in the shadows, and then something else will happen, and then the partner learns something else. Just maybe when they get their feet back on the ground, they're starting to reestablish trust, and the bottom drops out again. And so I think that really, not only is it emotionally painful, I would say it's downright traumatic for the partner. That's a traumatic experience to have your whole life shaken up and then try to reestablish trust and then have it shaken up again and again. And so really getting, living with integrity is really going to be key to prolonged recovery. But how that occurs is really important as well. And that's this process called disclosure that really needs to be a very formal process. And that is done really in conjunction with professionals who know and are trained to do this. And we recommend having a therapist or sex addiction therapist for both the primary addict and the partner, who can work on their own issues separately. And then after some period of time, not right away, and the period can vary. I've heard it as from 6 weeks to 2 months to sometimes longer, but it really depends on the individual case. There's a formal process where this disclosure is made. And I think the important part about the disclosure, maybe this will help in your case, this is not to go over every nitty-gritty, painful detail and episode. And, on this date, I did this with this person or with your best friend or, whatever the horrible story may be, but to really be more categorical. Over the past, I've acted out in these ways, and I've done these kinds of behaviors, as opposed to sort of being, there's an expression in 12-step program, being brutally honest. Sometimes we can be so honest that it in fact just hurts our partner more. And so having help structuring that disclosure is really important. That's where the role of the professional comes in. And so the partner really is entitled to a full disclosure of what's happened, but not necessarily the nitty-gritty details of every incident and every reaction, but more the categories of stuff. And that really, having the trust that that's a complete disclosure, really allows you to kind of reset the relationship and gives you a really firm foundation for trust. Otherwise, if you have things that are withheld, that's always going to be there, and no doubt it'll come out. But even if it doesn't come out, it really puts this kind of shadow into the relationship. I deal a lot with gay men, and I recall a case where someone was HIV positive and fell in love with someone and didn't know how to reveal their status. And it sort of went on, and suddenly it was like too late to reveal the status because they didn't know how to bring it up, and why wouldn't I have brought it up before? And it was a real mess. And of course it came out, and of course it had tragic consequences for everyone. So I think to really have a clean slate, to be honest, is going to be by far the healing force. And that's really, I think, an essential piece of healing to really save the couple. Now, if the couple wants to stay together, that may be a different issue. But I think it's really important to work that through. And no matter what happens with your partner, I think having that level of honesty and integrity is going to be really important. I totally get how scary it is, how there's shame around that. There's fear of what's going to happen. There's repercussions. There's fear of hurting someone we love even more. But when it's done in a proper way, it can be a healing force.
I ditto all of that. So please don't just go tell your partner all of it. That is, I call those vomit disclosures, and the poor partner gets this garbage thrown on them, and then they get left with the stench of it, and they're traumatized. It's horrible. So what Dr. David talked about, having a period of time, and so that you are preparing in a factual way, that has integrity, so that you have information that is useful for your partner to know, but like not the gory details, but also so that you have a period of time where you've got some recovery. If you're in active addiction, there's going to be another disclosure and another and another and another. It's going to keep happening. So having a little bit of a period of time so that the partner hopefully is starting to be able, that foundation of trust, that, that is built with disclosure. And then they're seeing that you're truthful and that you're intentional and you're working on rebuilding trust. So Dr. Rob's book, Out of the Doghouse, is an excellent book on rebuilding trust, but it also has a little chapter in there about disclosure, as does his Sex Addiction 101. So highly encourage you to get both of those. And please don't just go unburden yourself on your partner. It's devastating. I talk to partners all the time, and the level of trauma that they experience when this is done badly, you can't undo that. You can help them move through it, but you can't rewind and have them not be traumatized by that. So but if I could give you a magic wand and you could see how good recovery can be, and how having a healthy relationship that is connected with somebody in honesty, and you're not, like Dr. David talked about the shadow, there's always the shadow. There's always this wedge between you because you've got secrets. You're not being truthful. And so giving, your partner is not going to be happy. They just aren't. But it was like a high percentage, 92% of those that had a good therapeutic disclosure were glad they did it. And it was, a foundation for them, even if they didn't stay together. Many times that they're co-parenting or something like that. So there's reasons why they're going to continue to be in a relationship, even if they don't stay living together. So, so I think setting that foundation for, moving forward, can be very healing for everyone. So, but I know that you're in the moment burdened by the junk that you've done, and how you get free of that is getting into recovery. So.
And I would just add, when we keep secrets, first of all, our partners feel it, right? It's not, nobody can really pull that off very well. But we know it. And that, I think, is one of the biggest factors of relapse, is trying to hold that and contain that secret and keep it locked up in a compartment over to the side. We just can't do it, and nor should we try to do it. It's not healthy. So I think really it's a bad outcome for everyone.
Yeah, the secrets are shame, and shame. Yeah, it's a really bad spiral down. So the next question, there was a podcast before I leave that there's a podcast Mari Lee did with Dr. Rob on disclosure. Highly encourage you to take a listen to that one as well. So any of the podcasts are on the same webinar or same link that I put the webinar ones on in the chat. So that website, there's a zillion resources, including Dr. David's podcast series as well. So the next question, can you speak about how to tell whether an addict is a narcissist versus exhibiting symptoms of addiction? My SA husband claims years of sobriety, though doesn't seem to have real recovery. And you nailed it. He exhibits so many narcissistic traits, even when sober. Great question.
Yeah, really good question. So every addict in their disease mimics a narcissist, right? Addictive behavior is narcissistic behavior, very self-centered, very lacking empathy, very kind of isolated, grandiose, kind of knowing better than everyone else, thinking they can do it all by themselves. So that really kind of goes hand in hand. Now, how to distinguish someone who's truly a narcissist or has narcissistic traits versus just the effects of an addiction can get tricky. Although you say when they're claiming years of sobriety, those things should improve, right? If it's based on addiction. What we do find is that sex addiction and porn addiction particularly have a high level of narcissistic people in them, and every addict does, but I think maybe a little bit more with the sex and porn addiction field. But it really almost, trying to distinguish if this person is inherently narcissistic or not is almost beyond the point. Because even if you're a full-blown narcissist, with therapy and with self-awareness, you can start to correct some of those traits, right? You can learn to develop empathy. You can learn how to, and it may seem mechanical at first, but to really sort of practice putting yourself in the other person's shoes. And there's actually exercise and dialogue to kind of improve building that empathy. There are ways and every ounce of 12-step program is really kind of undoing that in terms of building community, building connection, having relationships with other people, giving of yourself, putting yourself, putting other people ahead of yourself, that kind of thing. So rather than worry, I think, about trying to figure out if he's an actual narcissist or not, I think it's important to maybe look at his behavior and the level of his engagement in recovery. I would say that if he's really working a program of recovery, even if he's a narcissist or just an addict who has those narcissistic traits, those should improve. And that we should start to see more empathy. We should start to see more connection. We should see more selflessness emerge. And I think, so I guess I would question the level of recovery, the commitment to recovery, and what he's actually doing in recovery. Because after years, as you say, of sobriety, there should be more improvement than that. Now, there are, I think, some guys who will claim, well, I'm just a narcissist, and kind of hide behind that and as an excuse for bad behavior, which I just won't accept. I don't buy, because I think I've seen miracles in program of really, really sick people who learn how to function well and how to create relationships that are healthy or somewhat healthy. And so I guess I would challenge the idea of what the label is, but really look at more the behavior and question the commitment to recovery and his actual engagement in recovery. I mean, it's really hard if you seriously work the steps and do a fourth step and a fifth step and start to practice the principles. It's really hard not to at least soften the edges of those narcissistic traits. And if you're not seeing that, I just question the commitment to the recovery process.
So 100%. Yeah. When I was reading this, I would go, yeah, I discern between sobriety and recovery. In alcoholism, we talk about white knuckling it and just like, people aren't really doing anything to change. They're just not drinking. So a bunch of things came to mind. Yeah. I don't know anything about, hang on. I don't know anything about what he's doing for recovery. I've talked in other webinars that, I see lots of people show up at meetings. They go to meetings. Well, he's going to meetings. I know lots of people that go to meetings and warm a seat. They'll talk to people a little bit, share a little bit about what's going on today or whatever, but they don't really work the steps that David was talking about. They aren't really working on making those changes. We talked in one of the webinars earlier today about the promises, but you'll be amazed before you're halfway through and you start seeing changes. And that's what I think partners should see, is they should start seeing those changes in their person. So if he's not, two things, I wondered also if, like we were talking about, how people can sabotage recovery because they start doing something else that keeps them kind of in that cycle, like, and eat, that I'm eating compulsively, or I'm, smoking, or, okay, I'm sober from sex addiction, but I'm drinking, too much so they haven't gotten into recovery. They are in recovery from, or they're sober from, the sex addiction. I'm not seeing prostitutes or whatever it was I'm doing, but, I haven't really had to work on anything. I can still use whatever else I'm using. So I slipped a link into the Couples Healing from Betrayal workshop for you. Consider that. On that link, it talks about the goals of the workshop, and it is, I'll share a couple. Course, I got to scroll. So rebuilding trust, genuine forgiveness, intimacy, establishing and implementing healthy boundaries, communication skills, learning how to have respectful and productive conflicts, and there's more, but planning for continued recovery and healing. And so there's a lot in there that I think could help you both, but I really would question what is his recovery plan? What does his sponsor say? What does his therapist say? All of those things, because you should start seeing inklings of a better person along the way. So
right. Tammy, I am in awe of your ability to multitask.
I have a separate screen. So yes, if I could have three screens, that would be a little compulsive, but it would be me. So, I was getting a phone call from a colleague, and yes, stuff goes on. Okay. There's not improvement despite a lot of recovery work, 4 to 5 meetings a week on spending many hours a week doing book work on contact with recovery brothers. Again, 4 to 5 meetings a week. That is, meetings are great, but meetings are grounding for me. They're good reminders. They're social. I get inklings, but that isn't where I learned to change my life as much. It's a good reminder and stuff like that. But, in the doing book work, I assume big book work, that would be good. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, like I still would encourage a higher level of help. Consider, like, if he's not working with a qualified therapist, go ahead.
On occasion, I have seen little groups of guys get together and do work, and they put in the clock hours, but sometimes it's a little kind of a closed circle, and they can end up enabling each other and being too easy on each other. So I would encourage him to kind of shake it up a little bit, maybe hang out with some other people in addition to these guys, and also get a therapist. I think a professional voice who is going to give him some feedback, because the way we grow in recovery is, first of all, we have to have that willingness. And I mean, he's certainly willing to spend the time doing it, but we also have to receive the feedback from people and get feedback. And I have seen these little groups in 12-step program where they kind of, it's almost too friendly and too cozy, and they don't challenge each other. They kind of enable each other, or give a pass, or kind of really enable each other. I mean, it's not a good process sometimes. So I would really encourage some fresh voices in his life that might reflect back a different message for him. And a good one might be a professional person who would be maybe more objective. But I have seen these situations where people kind of do the time, they go to the same people, they go to coffee, and it's almost more of a social thing than serious work. I mean, if he's putting in that much time, there really should be evidence of progress, more progress in my mind.
She adds, this is exactly what I've been saying, but I've been told to mind my own recovery. And so, and I have a little reaction to partners being in recovery. Somebody reframed it for me, and where they're recovering from the healing of the trauma they've experienced. I'm like, okay, then I can get there. But we really talk about prodependence, not codependence. You are not, addicted to the addict. Like there's a healing journey for you. 100% can get on board with that, and if that's the mindset of that. But this, and I'm just reading this. This feels like the stay on your side of the street, and you take care of you and I'll take care of me. But then who's taking care of the relationship? You're trying. And this feels like Dr. David was talking about, this, kind of closed loop. So a good therapist that knows what they're doing, individual sessions, and working with the group. Many therapists have offer groups. They have enough male or female, but have enough male clients that they are doing group therapy with these guys to further promote healing. So, and that is very powerful. That's very different when it's led by a qualified therapist than these guys, doing their own thing. And I've been around the tables a long time, so I'm not just, making stuff up. I see lots of that going on where people get to a certain level and go, this is good enough, and I know lots of people that go to, a meeting every day, and I love meetings. I have more of a life than that, and I want to be integrated with other people. I love my recovery friends too, but there's more. And so this does feel like he's stuck. And, I mean, there's possibly choices. I don't know, if he's really stuck in that. I don't know. I'm not trying to draw lines in the sand for you on anything, but feel free to share this webinar, and he can tell me to go fly a kite. I don't care. So I live a really healthy, connected life. You know, I have the benefits of having done the work. I continue to do the work. You know, I went to treatment. I had group therapy. I had individual therapy. I have a therapist. I don't have to see her right now. She's there in the background though. If I need her, you know, I can call. I had an issue a couple years ago and I was like, this is not serving me well. I went and saw her. I have not had that issue since then. So I still believe in all this stuff with the right, you know, with the right people. So good therapy is priceless. So next question. Al-Anon puts us through the 12-step process so we know what our spouses experience. Is there a resource that spouses can use to understand the seeking integrity experience or maybe go through some of the same process? So the book Prodependence, and I can reach my copy. Prodependence. See, I can do it too, David. We work from that lens. So we really are going, gosh, you are a hero. You have supported this person despite, you know, knowing that they are broken and struggling. Yay. And now we want to help support you. You've been traumatized. It's been tough. We want to support you. Can we help you create healthy boundaries? Sure. Can we help in the process? Absolutely. But it isn't, you are an enabler. You're addicted to the addict. You are codependent. You are like all those pathologizing, negative, pointing fingers, judgmental labels. You know, we really look at it from a very different lens, which is, you know, that whole lens is taking off, by the way. Dr. Rob's been approached by a major publishing company to create kind of an academic book about that. So this is going to be, I think a really cool thing. The partners are really resonating with that. But we want to be very supportive of that. And we expect when somebody comes, you know, at the end of the program, when you know, that loved one is returning back to you, we expect that you will see a different person. You will know what their aftercare plan is, so that you'll know what they were given as suggested, you know, to continue the recovery process. So everybody's on the same page, not that they have to police it, so to speak, but just so it's like, addicts lie, we know that. So if an addict says, well, they told me to do this, this, and this, you know, the partner can go, well, they actually said that, and that, you know, and, you know, just be on the same page. It's just information. So that's some of, you know, we want to support the partners. We have the drop-in groups, you know, Prodependent, including the old lady posse, but the Prodependent aligned support, you know, drop-in groups that are there. We have a Prodependent webinar with Kim Buck on alternating Fridays. So we have lots of resource. I try to help them find Prodependent support. We talked about the disclosure earlier. I want somebody to have a Prodependent aligned support person as they're preparing for a disclosure with their loved one. And
we also have a weekend. We have an intensive weekend for couples.
Yes.
Where
yes.
a lot of this material has gone over and reviewed, and it really is extremely healing for couples as well.
Yeah, yes, all of those goals that I just mentioned. And we are working on, and I'm hopeful of offering in April, a Prodependent partner support intensive. So it'd be over a weekend, and it would just be for partners. Kim Buck, Karen Brown, our clinical director, and I, on New Year's Eve, we were on a Zoom call. I said, well, that tells you the level of our lives right now, that on New Year's Eve, we're sitting on a Zoom, but we care about this material. And I said, I get all these requests for people to have this support, and we've not been able to offer it. So I wanted to get the ball rolling. And I'm hopeful that, you know, by April, that we'll be able to announce it hopefully yet this month, but, you know, by April, we'll be able to have a time just for these partners to come, you know, get some support and walk through some practical ideas that are in the Prodependence book, so that they can apply that and connect with other people. You know, that would be part of it as well. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Great. Thanks, Tammy.
Oh, great. So this person's coming to the couples retreat next weekend. Yay. Yeah, honestly, I've heard from the couples, both on an individual basis and on for the coupleship, that it was very healing. So, that's our goal with those, is that it's, it's a healing experience, personally and for the relationship. We want that to happen. So, you'll get, a lot of good information and a lot of support. So
Great.
glad to hear that. So
Good.
any other questions? We have just a couple more minutes if you have anything else. So I mentioned the drop-in groups and webinars, and I gave you the link, so please check those out. Podcast, Dr. Rob just did one with Tion Dayton this Monday, so that one should be dropping this tomorrow. And so so check that one out as well. That will be a new podcast.
Two new ones out as well. One with
Great.
Dr. Rob.
Oh, great.
Chemsex, and another with our own Scott Brasser talking about, is gay recovery different than straight recovery?
Oh, I'm gonna have to listen to both. I have not listened to those. So what I do is the multitasking. I'll often have those listening in the background while I'm answering emails and other things. So so great. I'm excited to listen to those. So I'm a fan. So
good.
Okay, well, I guess then I will close this up. Thank you so much, Dr. David. It was great working with you again. And thank you to all of you that joined. So grateful that you showed up and you asked questions. That's what makes it
challenge everybody to set an intention, whether it's to live in balance or to live with love or open your heart or whatever it may be. It really works.
Thank you, Dr. David.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.